welcome to another tier list video. As you can see, this time we have Dark States. I am once again joined by Silver, but this time we also have Mr.Bone and a special guest for the first two decks, Hartayawi, aka D.Boy from Crushing the Meta. So, without further ado, let's get straight into Bruce. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for having me on the channel, and it's pretty nice to be a part of this video. So so you asked me guys to talk about Bruce today to add to this beautiful tier list that we have right here. And as some of you guys already know, I specialize in Spike Brothers and Bruce. So when we talk about the unrivaled Bruce, right? So Bruce in general has 3 builds. One of them is not used anymore, so we're not talking about that, and that's the old Violence Bruce, which pretty much translated into the unrivaled Bruce. And then later on, we had the new version of Bruce, which is the Vehemence Bruce. But today, first we'll talk about the unrivaled Bruce. The unrivaled Bruce is the Grade 4 Bruce, which is one of the cards that actually got the most support. Some of them were not direct support, like it's not made for that deck, but some cards that you could use in it. And one of them is, of course, the dragon that pretty much all the nations have, which you can discard to stride with and you draw a card, or you could discard for your Grade 3. That card actually made a huge difference in the Grade 4 Bruce, as it soul charges from the drop zone, it draw you card, and it also becomes a 15k shield in hand because you'll be sitting on Grade 4. Another card that you add to the deck, which also gave it more defense and more consistency, is of course the promo Slicer, which could search your deck to add the Grade 4 Bruce. You could ride it. The only downside is you will not have Final Rush for your first turn, but you will have Triple Drive, and if you have the promo in hand, it's also 15k shield. And the third card that you add to the deck, the Cat, which also, of course, all nations have, which becomes 20k shield, and it's a counter charger. With all of those, if you play 4-4 and then 2 or 3 cats, you're adding 10 to 11 cards to the deck that have like a minimum shield of 15k, which makes the unrivaled Bruce very, very tanky and way more consistent. Now when it comes to the deck, you have different builds. We're not going to talk about those, otherwise the video will be too long. But we're talking about how does Bruce do in this meta. We chose to put it in fun, as we don't see it much played. But can the deck perform well if you play it in, let's say, more of a meta game? And the deck actually does pretty well. The deck is weak in the early game, as it has no early game at all, but you play against stride decks, most of them also don't really have early game, or some of them add extra engine to it like Nubatama does, which later on maybe will be restricted. So when it comes to Bruce, you don't really have early game at all. The only card that you could call is the Servant. It's another promo. You could call in the early game, you could rush with it a little bit, and later on when you ride into the Grade 4, even if you use the promo, you could make more soul and then put it to the soul to draw a card. That's pretty much it. And with all of those put to one deck, the deck is still not meta relevant. So that's one reason we chose to put it in fun. You could also say it needs more support, but pretty much it got all the support that it could get, as in the promo and all the other cards, and it's not good enough to call it meta, and also it's not played enough to call it meta. So that's it for the unrivaled Bruce. Now we talk a little bit about the Vehemence Bruce, which more people will be like, is this not the stronger Bruce? Well, yes and no. The deck has some really nice features, like the Great One, Stephanie, that you could call in the back row behind the Bruce, and she will power up your Bruce even in your opponent's turn, which makes him an 18k. But if you play against any deck that has any form of retirement power or field control, you could get rid of that Great One, and with that your Bruce will go back to 13k. All other cards that you have in the deck that makes it a little bit more tanky are just 10k shield. which makes it actually less tanky than the Unrivaled Bruce. The deck could go off whenever you hit your Grade 3 turn, so it doesn't need to wait for your final rush as the Grade 4 Bruce does, but the downside to it is it doesn't have a stronger turn, which means you only have those 4 or 5 attacks with the new Geno, but that's pretty much it. It lacks power, as in you rely on your persona right to get the power, but other from that, it doesn't have the crit pressure, it doesn't have anything. While the Unrivaled Bruce does have the critical, as you could give your Vanguard more crits, like it could hit for 3 or 4 damage, it benefits more from the overtrigger from Dark State, and that's the reason it's, in my opinion, a little bit stronger than the Vehemence Bruce. And so I think that's it for the Bruces, and you could add to it like the decks could get more support, but I think both decks or all the Bruces have enough support to make good deck and still have different variations of the deck, but all put together are not relevant for the current meta. You could not really call them as competitive as they should be. When the deck first got introduced, people were very excited about it and they tried it a lot and they put too much time and effort into it to make it a very strong deck. But if you look at it right now, I think most people would not even touch the deck. So if you ask me personally, I will put it in irrelevant because the deck actually is not doing well. You don't see it anywhere. While the Unrivaled Bruce could actually surprise you out of nothing. It could just win a tournament. If you have your stronger turn and your opponent has no PGs or only one PG in your hand, you could just win. But when it comes to the Vehemence Bruce, I think it should go into irrelevant. Maybe some of the Bruce players could not agree with that. But then again, if you ask them, will you play Bruce in any upcoming tournament? They will say no. So, does it fall into irrelevance? If you ask me, I would say yes.
Thank you for joining us for this part, and I wish you a fantastic evening.
Thank you for having me, and thank you guys for watching this amazing video. Enjoy this tier list. And don't forget, if you don't agree with anything we say, just put it in the comment section below, and we would love to comment back on your comments. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Alright, Baromagnes. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. This used to be one of my favorite decks, like back in the day, like set 5, set 6
I think it was
maybe.
set 4.
Maybe even set 4. Yeah, it's been a long time, but this used to be one of my favorite decks, and it used to be really strong. Like you could argue that you would struggle to get to 15 soul, but if you got there, most decks couldn't do anything to you. And you would just fall over and die. They would make 100k columns with Swirler and just swing at you, and you wouldn't be able to do anything. But yeah, how times have changed.
To be fair, they still do it.
You can still do it, but the deck just really doesn't have any hand whatsoever, and that really hurts it. Like if it gets rushed early, like there's pretty much nothing it can do. It just needs to sit there, take either damage or throw away its soul charge pieces to defend itself, and that way it's just not gonna do anything. It does get better with the cycle cards, the energy cyclers I mean. This allows the deck to actually have a little bit of hand in the early game and survive till grade 3 and search for its pieces to actually get to that 15 soul. So if it high rolls, yes, it can still blow decks out of the water, but it doesn't do that consistently enough. However, we do know that it will get support in Divine Set 2 with a new card that lets it soul charge 2 and put stuff from drop zone back on the bottom of the deck. So this does help it get back to that 15 soul and help it with its only weakness. Well, its other weakness besides its hand is deck out. So yeah, that used to be a real problem back in the day. You would soul charge so much that you would actually just deck yourself out and lose the game before you would even finish it. But now I feel like that's no longer gonna be an issue. But for now, yeah, I think he deserves to be in need support. But he will get it. Next, my new favorite deck, Greedon.
The opposite story.
This is the opposite story. This went from basically irrelevant to straight up into meta. People used to sleep on it when Greedon Masques got revealed, but it quickly changed when I think, what was it, BCS France happened and everybody decided to bring Greedon, including me. and a lot of them topped. And it only gets better with Divine Set 1. We get a couple of new cards. One of them is Desire Devil that lets you Energy Blast 3 to call a card from your soul to rearguard, any rearguard. So it's just a straight up upgrade over the card we've been using, the Dragon Tree Wretch. But it's only on place, so I guess it has a little bit of a downside to it. But in my argument, just run both of them and you'll always have access to whichever card you want from your soul. And this deck just got even better with Divine Set 1, so yeah, I would definitely still put it in meta. It might not be the best deck out there, but it's still definitely a threat. I don't know if you guys agree.
I definitely agree. This deck, I love facing it. I recently faced it once again by somebody else, and I was like, oh yeah, this deck just keeps doing things. It just keeps performing. It's strong. It's gonna keep being strong, I think, and it definitely deserves its upgrades that it's gotten, because that first wave of support was atrocious.
Yeah, there used to be like barely any support for Greedon Masques because all the old support used to be name restricted to the old Greedon, so you couldn't use it anymore. But yeah, we did manage to find a way to make it work, and now we're golden, we're set. The only argument against Greedon, in my opinion, is like, yeah, it is trigger reliant. If you start the early game with like a bunch of triggers in your hand, you know, like your chances of winning the game are gonna go down. But I think it's still a pretty threatening deck. It can drag out games sometimes, and you might lose to deck out. But usually things go your way. You should be able to finish pretty early. With enough guard restrict, your opponent will not be able to do anything. Next up is, I think this is Baphormedes, the what would you call it? The Bastion of Dark States. I don't know what to say about this. It's one of those decks that doesn't really see any play, doesn't have any dedicated support. So I would just straight up put it into irrelevant, in my opinion. Put it just at the bottom for now. Next up is Kheios. Kheios is a very interesting deck in my opinion. I used to have a very, very low opinion of this deck. I thought it was just a mess of like one-offs that didn't do anything. But now with now I've actually tested all of these decks, and with the new promo that lets you immediately ride into the new version of Kheios, this deck is actually quite threatening, because if you read carefully, none of the cards have a grade 3 restriction. You can just go ham when your opponent is at grade 2. You can just do a bunch of attacks with ridiculously high power, and yeah, it's just good. I'm actually surprised, but this is a really good deck in my opinion. It might not be considered meta, but it is definitely one of those decks that if you are not prepared, it can just surprise you.
Yeah, I absolutely hate this thing. The promo made this absolutely unbearable to go second against.
I also think it's quite easy to like get to the different cards in Soul to have all your abilities live. You might think it's not, but yeah, every game I just got there, so
yeah, you don't really struggle for it anymore.
Yeah, I think it's actually quite a consistent deck right now, so I would definitely put it in irrelevant.
I will say if the deck goes second, it's just straight up fair. If it goes first, it's absolutely dominating with the crit pressure and the huge power.
Yeah, that's fair. I agree. It does do quite a bit less when going second, but that still doesn't change anything. I think it's still quite good.
I completely agree. Like, there's nothing that hasn't been said already. This deck got the upgraded, sorely needed, to be fair.
Moving on. Drajeweled. Ooh, now this is kind of a tough one. I have a love-hate relationship with Drajeweled. As many people know, I used to love playing Drajeweled Masques. It was such a fun deck, but it only had like one really explosive turn when you Persona right using the mask. And then other than that, it didn't really do all that much. So it was not the greatest deck, but I really loved it. Now, Drajeweled Ignis, on the other hand, I don't know, this deck, I really don't like it. Many people consider it a good deck, even a meta deck, but I kind of disagree with it. This deck just doesn't do much in the early game. It's just another great. It has that grade 4 deck issue where you just sit there doing nothing in the early game, just taking damage, getting rushed usually, and then you just hope that you will stay alive for long enough to get into that grade 4 and get your explosive turn and hope you kill your opponent, because if you don't, you're not winning at all. You're just trying to survive mostly. It does get better, like again with Divine Set 1 with the energy cyclers, you get a bunch of more draws, and that really helps the deck just survive in the early game and actually get its pieces. But for now, yeah, some people might hate me for this, but I would put it in relevant. It is a good deck, it can definitely win, but it struggles against a lot of decks in my opinion. So that's why I wouldn't put it any higher than relevant. What do you guys think?
I would also rather put it in relevant, because it can be very explosive and very aggressive, especially on their kill turns. Your opponent just has 2 options: they survive it or they don't. Like, if they don't survive it, then you just obviously just win. If they do survive it, you're probably fucked, because they're going to be taking advantage of the fact that you tried to kill and probably wasted a lot of your resources and your hands. The deck is also quite clunky. Some turns are very, very awkward, and I also have seen it really struggle against damage denial. Like, I feel like it doesn't really do much if you take away their counterblasts.
That's interesting. I kind of agree. Like, yes, grade 4 doesn't need the grade 4 doesn't need counterblast, but like, you need counterblast for your grade 3 Drajeweled, you need counterblast for your restanders, you need counterblast for the grade 4 dragon that puts cards back into soul and draws you a card. Like, yes, those cards are all good, but yes, you need counterblast, and yeah, if you don't have it, you're not doing much. It does. I mean, there's an argument that this deck is quite tanky with like the grade 4 the dragon that if you reveal a grade 4, you get like 15k shield. So there's that argument that you could survive the early game, but I don't know. I feel so mixed about this deck.
The opinion is valid.
Alright, I think he's fine for now in irrelevant. Maybe we'll move him up, but I don't know. But you could argue that you should put him above Kheios, you should put him in meta, but I think for now he's fine there.
I personally think he's just a pretty good counter pick for meta right now, because I think he does pretty well against stride decks specifically, because they don't really have the early game to actually like threaten their jewels.
That is true. Like, if you play against a deck that doesn't rush and like also needs its time to get going, then this deck does perform quite well, I would say. Like, if you have the freedom to wait till turn 4 to get into Drajeweled Ignis and do your thing and do that for multiple turns, then this deck is quite good, I would say. Yeah. But not everyone is going to let you do that. Like, yeah, that's the issue. It all kind of depends on the matchup, I think. Okay, moving on. Luquier. This is quite a fun deck in my opinion, but it kind of struggles a little bit. It doesn't have that much hand. The only thing Luquier has going for it is that it can make some very, very big columns and very big attacks, but that's like the only thing it does. It makes a couple big attacks and then it just kind of dies because it doesn't have the hand to survive literally anything. So I don't really know where to put this deck. I would put it in need support, but it has already gotten quite some support with like the promo. I don't know.
I personally just think she belongs in fun. I always feel like if people don't check a critical trigger on their draft check, then their Luquier turns are never really that threatening, because your opponents can just take the huge swings if they know how to properly guard. So yeah, I feel like you need to be very lucky to get some wins with Luquier.
I can definitely go for the need support, because just like with my D.Boy, Azel, with Pablo's Maelstrom, they have only gotten their first wave of dedicated support, if you will. So she just needs her Venus. I'm not gonna go for the reverse because I don't think we're gonna see reverse, but like she might need just Venus, and it will all be good.
Yeah, I agree. I think she just needs like the new form, and then she will probably be at least fun, if not relevant. But for now, she just doesn't do all that much. She's just a deck that she's a fun deck that needs support. Yeah. The next deck, Chronojet. Chronojet was one of those decks that used to be really meta dominating, but I feel like it has fallen off a little currently. Like in the English format, it just doesn't really do all that much. But in my opinion, like it does get like a little bit of a boost again in Divine Set 1 with the energy cyclers. Allows it to once again draw. The new promo is also quite nice in my opinion. Like it allows you to use your generation break abilities when you have not strode yet. So yeah, you can do some shenanigans with that, like use your Grid 2 that calls a Great One and then make some cool kind of attacks with that. But other than that, yeah, it still doesn't really do all that much in the early game. But it does survive long enough to get the crest going, so it gets huge power now. So I would still put it in relevant. I would put it at the bottom of relevant for now, but it is still a deck that can like do well in tournaments, I feel like, or like win locals.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it got a little bit better and more fun with just like the more dedicated support that it just got instead of like the really annoying swirler or GG combo stuff that they used to do.
Yeah, that's also a new thing. Like you can just kind of cut that now, I feel like, with the energy cyclers. You don't need to struggle there, like call swirler, put it back, call GG, Soul Blast 2, draw a card. Like you can still call GG and Soul Blast a couple of times to get those draws, but like you don't need to do that whole awkward play anymore, I feel like. So yeah, that just gives you room for other stuff in your deck. I feel like it's just better now. So I would put Chronojet in relevant for now.
Yeah, looks pretty good to me.
Yeah.
I mean, we see it pop up sometimes at our locals, and it can do well. It can surprise people.
Yeah, it can still be quite scary. Not like the scariest thing, but it can still do what it does, and it does it well. So yeah. Next up is Favrneel. Oh god, what to say about this deck? This deck is a mess in my opinion for a couple of reasons. First, like the way you play it is just, it feels weird. Like you need to go through like hoops to even get to where you want to go to get your Vanguard restand, and then there's the fact that you need to buy like 3 or 4 of the structure deck to get the copies of the, I think it's the Countercharge or maybe the Persona Ride guy. I don't remember which one exactly, but like you need to spend like at least what is it, like $200 to build the deck. And who's gonna do that? Who's gonna spend that much money just to build a mediocre deck? In my opinion, this deck is just kind of bad. But it also doesn't really have that much dedicated support yet. So I don't know. I will put it in need support for now. Probably like below Luquier. The fact is also like its ability is Counterblast 2. Counterblast 2 is so expensive. Like it's so easy for your opponent to just play around that. Like if you don't have your counter charger, you're not gonna do much, and you need to be on a certain amount of grades and soul to even get that ability. So yeah, I don't know, this deck is just a mess.
It for sure is a mess. This deck, like the best chance it probably has is Dear Days 2 coming to your store soon, I suppose. This deck just wants to be Overlord with a gimmick. And you could just play Overlord if you really want to do this. It's probably cheaper to get Overlord in this day and age than get Favrneel.
It's just like, if you really wanted a restanding Vanguard deck, why aren't you just playing Greedon? Why aren't you playing Greedon? It's probably cheaper to build and way better. Like
you do have those. You have a restander.
Yeah.
You have no restanders in Dark States.
It's also like the fact that like you need the promo and then you need to bind it from Soul, I believe, to even activate Persona Ride, because that's such a weird restriction. Like it used to be a cool gimmick, like, oh, you can only play one of these, and then you get this really cool Vanguard that restands, but now it's just like, it doesn't have enough power. Like, if you don't have that card that activates Persona right, you just sit there with a 13k Vanguard swinging twice. Like, woo, scary, but not really.
Is that 23?
Had like a skill that gave itself 10k. And
Yeah, if you did not ride this turn, it gets 10k and a crit. But like on your first turn, you're just sitting there swinging for 13. Like, wow, nobody's gonna be scared of that. It's just not that great. It could get better with some new support. I can believe it can get some support, but for now it's just not doing much. Next up is Almajestar Masques or Baphormedes Masques, I believe. This deck, I think it should probably just straight up go into the fun tier. It used to be a pretty awkward deck, like it didn't do much. It used to struggle to just really do anything because you needed your critical triggers in your bind zone and then you like restand. And it still just doesn't do all that much, but like you actually have hand now with the energy cycler, so it can survive for quite a bit in my opinion, and it can like slowly get to that point where it starts making like pretty scary numbers. But yeah, and it needs to get there. I think this is pretty much the definition of a fun deck. It also will get new support in, I think, Divine Set 2 that will actually make this deck pretty good. I don't know how good yet, but it will get better. So for now, it is just a fun deck. Then
what's the hammer guy do?
Good question. I have no idea. I think it's just bad Chronojet in my opinion. Till we decide to make this tier list, I didn't even know this card existed. I don't know. I don't really have anything to say about this. I would just straight up put this card into irrelevant. I've never seen this card.
Anything good.
I've never seen anyone play this card, and it's just like, I think it time leaps something, but then again, why would you play this card if you could play Chronojet? So,
you did give it a try though. Like you did try this deck to see.
Did I?
Yeah, you played it like I think 4 or 5 games against Pablo, and yeah.
I'm not sure that was me, but yeah, maybe.
Well, I definitely saw somebody play this deck for the tier list, and I was like, oh yeah, you could just buy a Chronojet Stride deck set and have way more fun.
Well, I think that says enough. Like, just play Chronojet. The next deck we'll talk about is Ominagruzio. Now, this is a very interesting deck. This deck, as far as I know, doesn't get any new support in Divine Set 1 or Set 2 for now. But I still think it's a pretty good deck. Like, it doesn't swing for too big of a number, but like the fact that you reduce your opponent's shield value and that they can't see defensives makes this deck actually quite scary. It also has a Vanguard restand, which you should never underestimate. It's not quite meta right now, I feel, but I would probably put it at the top of fun, above Bruce for now.
Yeah, I do think it belongs there. I like playing this deck actually, but sometimes it can be very inconsistent in the fact that it is a mouse deck and it does run a lot of grade 3s. So sometimes you really just don't have shield value in hand, even though you sometimes have a huge hand.
Yeah, but it's just all grade 3s, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and set 1 of Divines, it basically just gets the energy cycler. But to be honest, you barely have space to run it. I feel like in set 2, you have a little bit other options already to start looking at. But right now in set 1, it really doesn't do a lot. It does have the ability to like suddenly like do a surprise sweep. Because the amount of times where I just, you know, half-heartedly swing at my opponent, I'm like, oh, they're definitely going to survive this. And then suddenly they're at 6 damage. It's just like, wow, really? I wasn't even trying. The shield reduction can be very, very sneaky.
Yeah, it does like manage to like sneak in wins because you think like, yeah, your opponent's just gonna be able to guard this, but they just can't. They just start adding up the numbers in their head and they're like, why don't I why don't I have shield? Why can't I guard this? This is such a low number. Why can't I guard this?
The fact is also like the Vanguard usually swings for quite a low number, but the rear guards can become huge.
Yeah,
Misery Wings.
Misery Wing, yeah.
Also, Lindalkia with a booster is nothing to scoff at either, especially with reduced shield value. They would already be quite hard to guard with normal shield value consistently. So constantly having -5 on everything can really make you struggle.
Yeah, that is true. Like, they can swing for like 28, 35, 38, maybe even more. So sometimes that does make it quite difficult to guard with only 10k shield for critical trigger, for example. So yeah, I think this deck is like at the top of fun. Like, it's not quite there yet to be meta relevant or even relevant for tournaments, but it can definitely win games.
I have to add something. If you are an enjoyer of tag fight like we are, this deck is the perfect one to pair up with just about anything. If you have something that's slightly tanky in the early game or has some kind of like disposable hand for some reason, this is the best tag partner you can ask for, because you will just like defend it while it's setting up, and then it can just start messing with your other like opponent that you don't have to interact with all that much, so that they have to start guarding more from hand, and then suddenly you're like, oh, but now I can do my stuff because my opponent right in front of me has not had the chance to do anything except guards. So like suddenly that deck just becomes mega good, and it's so funny. Like last time we had our tag fight, this deck just like you had to just set up the early game, and then suddenly like they had no chance. Extra info for those that like the alternative format.
Alright, thank you. Let's go straight into the Divine set decks now, starting off with the trial deck boss, Oselargest, I believe. What to say about this deck? This deck really doesn't have much dedicated support. Like, you get the idea, like, wants to put stuff in its soul and then call stuff back out, and it just kind of has that pale moon vibe going on, but yeah, it just really doesn't have the support yet, or the dedicated cards to make it work. It just kind of falls flat right now, like some of the other trial deck bosses, I believe. So for now, I definitely wouldn't put it in irrelevant, because this deck is just like, it hasn't even released in English, but from looking at Japan, like, this deck doesn't really do all that much right now. But like, yeah, I would just put it in need support. Till it gets dedicated support and we can see what it does, then like I wouldn't put it any lower. There's no reason to put it in irrelevant yet.
It does win best trial deck art out of the 5, in my opinion.
I agree, but I'm biased because I love all of Dark State's art, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I really like the art for Brandgate. I really like the Keter one. But this one just screams like menacing, cool art. Like, yeah, he wins in that category, in my opinion.
Then moving on to probably one of the best decks to be released is Direful Doll Master Androld, I believe. Arnold?
Yeah, it's Androld's.
Arnold.
Hey, Arnold.
Hey Arnold, yeah. This deck can straight up go into meta, I think. This is such a scary deck. Yeah, I would put it even above Greedon, in my opinion. Like, if it plays against Greedon, it's just gonna outgrind Greedon and just make it go deck out. Like, this deck is so ridiculously tanky while doing multi-attacks, while hitting good numbers, while recycling cards, binding stuff, being able to guard from bind zone. Like, this deck just does everything, doing triple drives. Like, this deck is absolutely ridiculous. I think it's definitely going to be a meta contender. No argument about that.
It does have one glaring weakness, and that is time. Like,
yes.
This deck is tanky, but that could be its undoing at the same time. Like, you will stall games so long. And don't get me started on the mirrors. Yeah, this deck is as strong as you say, but if there's like a time schedule thing, I don't think you'll see it pop up all that much, because, you know, they will just go into time and lose which is
Yeah.
sad.
I agree. That's probably like the only weakness this deck has is the time regulations in official tournaments. Like, if you go into time, you might win because of damage comparison because you've not taken enough damage. But other than that, like if you might just end up with a double loss and nobody wants that. So yeah, be careful when playing this deck. Don't go into time.
I do
Other
have
than
to
that-
disagree though. I don't think that's its only weakness.
Oh, okay.
It's very, very tough. No lie about it. It can do 5 attacks, and I mean, basically everything gets padded with the Binding Guard skill. But I have seen it struggle against decks that actually don't really do that many attacks. Like, if you're playing a deck that only has 3 or 4 attacks, it really can't capitalize on the Bind Guarding effect because they can only guard once from the Bind Zone per attack. So the more attacks you do, the more they can pad it up with the Bind Zone.
So you mean like decks that just do like only 3 or 4 swings, but like really big swings? That's
Oh, yeah,
like it's
definitely.
kind of its weakness. Can you give an example of a deck that like fits that description?
Right now, I would say Zorga and Prison right now. Both of those swings are a high number criticals, only 3 to 4 attacks each time. So that really puts a strain on their defensive power. And another weakness they actually have, right now they kind of rely on Schwartz Sparta to bind critical triggers and heal triggers from their soul, so that they can use those as 20k guards. If you just get rid of the Schwartz Spartas with control cards, they don't have as many opportunities to stack up their bind zone.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for your opinion. I think that's a valid argument. Would you put it lower in that case?
I would still definitely put it in meta because not every deck can actually accommodate to those things. It's very matchup dependent in the end. But I would leave it definitely in meta. I can't say if it's better or worse than Greedon though, because I feel like both of the decks have their own strengths and weaknesses, and they're not really comparable.
In my opinion, like I think it's better than Greedon if you like would put the 2 decks against each other and like a matchup. But if you would like let's just say you would have to choose between either Direful Dolls and Greedon, which deck you would take to a tournament. I couldn't really say which deck would perform better in the end. Maybe with Shiranui running around, there is an argument to not take Greedon, but yeah, then again, if you don't face Shiranui, you might just win.
Yeah, but let's be honest, you are going to face Shiranui. So honestly,
True.
with that in mind, for now, I would put Direful Doll as a better meta pick. Just
Yep.
because, like what I said, like the more attacks you do, the more powerful Direful Dolls is, and I think Direfuls are the perfect counter pick to deal with all the Shiranui attacks.
There's also the fact that they will once again get more support in Divine Set 2, so this deck is only going to get better.
Yeah, I also have a little info dump from Delhi.
Yeah.
May he recover soon. He once played a test match where he did not swing with his Vanguard for 4 turns, and he won.
Yeah, that was against me.
Oh yeah.
Because we were both playing grind decks. I was playing Veleno.
Yeah, he felt like everybody should know that.
Yeah, that is something I do not recommend to the viewers at home. Please do not play 2 grind decks against each other because it's no fun for either person.
What do you mean?
Spread the suffering.
Don't you want to go into time?
Jesus, I think we would have gone into time twice at that point.
Yeah, there's hour-long games, must be fun.
Because the whole reason he wasn't swinging with Vanguard is it was going to deck him out because of the damn triple dry. But I still had to guard all the rear guard swings with the whole recalling shenanigans, so...
Alright. I think we're pretty good with Direful Dolls right now. Moving on to our last deck. Grifogila, the Dragon Tree, straight up in the top of meta. This deck is so good, like it just does everything. Like it soul charges and help me out here, guys. What does
It's a dragon from a tree.
right?
That's so good.
It can check Dark States over trigger. Like it can get 10k and a crit.
Yeah, that's way too good.
That's insane.
Maybe we should put it in a separate tier. Good. It's so good that it deserves its own tier. This is good information. Please understand that this does not overtake its meta position. Yeah, we should probably put it in like brackets. This is a joke.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just put it where it belongs. Just straight in the bottom of It's yes, thank you, Nelly.
No.
No,
You also want to know what I realized today? I faced it randomly during one of my games today, and I just realized it doesn't even get an energy generator now.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Wait, it doesn't?
No, because it doesn't write into a grade 1.
Oh my god, that's insane! Oh my god, that makes it so bad. Okay, like, can we just put it where it belongs, like bottom of irrelevant, please? Like,
Put it down there.
It's honestly worse than irrelevant.
So no, he's revolting.
Can we like hire a new editor, please?
Yes. We'll dispose of the previous one. Don't worry. Oh. I feel bad. But yeah, that's it for the tier lists actually. So just remember that sad face is every Grifogila player ever. We feel bad for all of them. But yeah, we feel very happy that you guys liked this video, that you have been enjoying the other ones, which has been insane. We want to thank you to all the people who've subscribed, and if you haven't, you can press that button. But without further ado, that's it from us. And we'll see you guys with the next one.
Bye.
Bye bye.